experienced or current suicidal ideation and crisis center workers. And then like they go through the training to help others, when in reality it's probably helping themselves.
And we're live!
He did it again.
You knew I was going to do that. Bart saw it. He saw it coming. Oh my, did you say that up, Bart?
No, completely spontaneous.
Oh my goodness. So everyone, AAAS 18, everybody do it with me. Hashtag AAAS 18 is coming up. The pre-conference is on, I don't know the days of the week, it's Wednesday, right? It's on Wednesday. There are all sorts of events. I am here with another one of our fabulous student researchers. I'm so excited that we have early career researchers who are looking at these technology innovation research designs that I think have so much potential and promise for our field. And this is a wonderful bookend to Ian Sarah last week, which was fabulous. We learned all sorts of things about networks. And I got this guy named Brian here. We have so many Brians in the house, right? I even have a brother named Brian. There's too many, so you're going to have to help me with this. Okay. But I'm bad with names anyway, right, Josh? Sorry, I just called Bart Josh randomly. It's an old.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, I remember. I do remember when you did that. It was fine.
The truth is that if we were really good self-promoters and we went through all the different panels that you could see all of us in and SPSMers in, it would be some ridiculous amount of the conference. Up right at the front, though, I'm going to let you know, a lot of SPSMers like to eat, and they like to eat together, and they like to eat together at AAS, which they're now calling, what is it, Suicide Summer Camp? I think that's the hashtag. We are going to be meeting up, it looks like, at the Dubliner, about 6 to 8. It's like a pub style thing. If you can order food at the bar, start a tab. There won't be a check nightmare, Bart, if you do that. So you can just close out your tab where you order your food. What do you think, Bart? No, Bart?
I don't believe this.
Cautiously suspicious. Cautiously suspicious. I've been hurt, and when people have been hurt, they grow, but they also learn. And I've moved past the pain, but I'm still on the lookout for other future wounds, and so I think that's where I am at as a human being.
Well, we're gonna try to keep you safe, Bart, from being stuck with the tip and the check at the end of the dinner for 35 people like last time.
Yeah, so, all of which had dyscalculia.
So that is true. So if you want to come hang out, this isn't an official thing. It's just if you want to come hang out, there's a lot of events going on Thursday night, but Thursday night, we're all going to have just got there. Many of us will have been doing social media, various stripes all day, and we're just going to be chilling in between other events and receptions that evening. It's within walking distance of the hotel. Like if you want to take a break and just chill with some of your other community members, that is the plan. That being said, everyone say hi to Tony. Tony, say hi to the people.
Hey, everybody. I mean, we're headed to AAS, so like, you know, I'm the chair of the board of the American Association of Suicidology. I'm also the COO of Quantify. Check us out. OurDataHelps.org. Donate your data today. Suicidology.org. Join today and come to the conference if you're going to be in DC for a week or so. Or and just a day.
Rally? There was someone
even sell you a ticket, I think. I mean, not online, I don't think, right now. Is that right? Are we done with online? Chris?
We're done with online.
We're done with online, so you can just show up with cash money, just give it to anybody. Well, not anyone. Not anyone. Give it to Amy Culp.
Give your cash to Amy Culp.
Just make it rain on me.
Make that a hashtag.
Just take your crumpled money and just drop it in Amy's hand. She'll sort it out for you.
This is gonna end up somewhere. Good job. Bart Andrews, say hi to the people.
Hey, hello everybody. I'm really excited. We're all going to be together in a really short period of time, so things have gotten a little loopy in the preparation for AAS 18, which is chocked full of amazing content. I am super excited, and our guest tonight has some interesting things that we present at the conference. I want to make sure that as we're talking about the stuff, we highlight where he's going to be at so that we can ramp up that attendance. The last show and this show are areas that I'm just really excited about. I love getting to learn from these new researchers in our field, and I cannot wait for Brian to get to share what he wants to talk about and not what April wants him to talk about. On that note, Chris Maxwell.
We're into the same research. Chris Maxwell.
Oh, hey. I'm Chris Maxwell, Communications Coordinator for American Association of Suicidology. I'm actually already at the conference hotel. I've had a chance to kind of snoop around.
Bragger.
And yeah, kind of had a chance to snoop around a little bit, see where we're going to be at. Things look like it's going to be laid out really, really well this year. There's a really nice and beautiful ballroom space that we're going to have all of our plenaries and a bunch of our TED Talks and all that kind of stuff. And then our breakouts are going to be kind of all over the place. So it's going to be 2 or 3 days full of just running around and everybody saying hi, and it's going to be awesome. So I'm just getting really, really excited.
Did you get the package? It's supposed to be delivered tonight, tomorrow, that I sent you for SPSM stuff.
The stuff
with the rings? With the ring?
No, I have not. I was not alerted of its presence yet.
I'll double check. That being said, where will the social media people be hanging out? So if you're on the social media team, if you need to charge a device, do any of that.
Good question. So the social media, the official social media ambassadors already know this, but obviously anybody else who wants to come and hang out, recharge, help out with social media, feel free to join us in the Sequoia room, which is going to be on the 2nd floor on the South Tower. And that's important to know, because on the 2nd floor of the North Tower, you find the fitness center, and that's not where we do tweeting from.
In the Sequoia room, South Tower, social media
floor.
room, 2nd floor.
Yep.
Now, and Chris,
thank you, Chris.
There's like an app or something. Like if you want to find SPSMers, like say you just love Jonathan Singer and you're like, I need me some Zang. How do you find how to get that?
Well, who's saying that?
We all say it. Sometimes I cry it out in my sleep.
Okay. I have to give Zing as much shit as possible. Yeah, the conference app. You can, well, there's 2 ways you can go about this. You can go on to the App Store or the Google Play Store, and you can download Guidebook, the Guidebook app, and then you can just search for AAS through there. Or you're supposedly able to just search for AAS or Suicidology through the App Stores. Mm-hmm. I haven't tried that, so I don't know if it works.
I have. It totally works. If you just search Suicidology, the app comes like right up.
So this is the app that we've had the last couple of years, where you can go in, you can look at the entire schedule, you can create your own schedule, you can direct message folks through the app. You can actually, this is new for this year, I haven't seen this before. For each session, you can actually start like a conversation or discussion thread. So you can keep track of like who's going to be there, or you can start the conversation before the session even. So lots of really cool stuff to check out on that.
So
point, Chris. 12 years and up on the AAS app. It was pretty clear as I'm downloading it. 12 and up. So this app is not approved for 11 and under. And I just, for the sake of responsible
Jane's 12.
broadcasting, it's 11 and under. You don't get the app.
And we have one more guest with us tonight. Just really quickly. We have one more board member in the room, if that's even possible. Everyone, just real quick, he's around the corner. He's eating Reese's Pieces. Dr. Ray Tucker!
Hey, everybody. I'm on delay here. It's messing with my head. At Raymond P. Tucker, the Student Division Director of American Association of Suicidology and the Program Chair for next week's conference.
So you know something about this?
Yeah, I had an Excel sheet. So there's some things in there. Really excited about it. Excited to see everybody. Excited to see Brian present like 8 times. Good collaborator.
Wow.
Yeah, he's gonna be busy.
Wow. Good luck.
Yep.
Good luck. God
Has
bless.
Ray always had the beard? Has Ray always had the beard?
No, Ray's not always had the beard. The beard's new.
Is the beard new? Is the beard a new thing for him?
It's what the hipsters do these days. I don't know. I'm not too, but people like the 70s, if they're reliving it, I don't ask about their armpits and their faces. It just all looks. it's just all this hair everywhere. I'm like, I don't know, man.
According to the app, we missed transnational activism in post-1945 East Asia this morning. I don't know how we missed that. Chris, were you there? Tell us what it was like.
Let's actually introduce our guest. We're actually just on time for this. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You were a student, and tell us a little bit about what you're studying and how you ended up somehow in Baton Rouge in my dining room.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Brian Bauer. I'm at University of Southern Mississippi right now with Dean Capron. So I'm getting my PhD in clinical psychology. So I'm second year, second time going to AAS in the last year. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Met some really great people. So right now, I'm kind of interested, honestly, in everything. And so
it's that time of your career.
It is. And so I research a lot of like capability stuff. I think that's like a big research focus of mine right now. I've had this thing. So I listen to Freakonomics podcast. I don't know if you guys have ever.
Oh, we all know. Did you just see them? Rock solid again. Keep going.
You had me at Freakonomics. Go on, Brian.
Yeah, so I mean, that's honestly like, I'm not joking. I just took like 2 of their episodes and I was like, I'm just gonna put this to suicide research. And so that's where like it just came from Freakonomics Radio. I took whatever they did and I was like, I'm just gonna take this and run with it. And so I read like the other one was by Daniel Kahneman, the Thinking Fast and Slow.
That's like Tony's favorite book.
Yeah, and so I was reading all these books and trying to.
What about Versti?
And so I was trying to.
You got it. Okay.
I haven't heard.
They're gonna end up cuddling at the party. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, so I mean, I took this episode that they did with a couple of things like item count techniques, which they call list randomization. Some things with nudges, which is a really big thing. Richard Thaler just won the Nobel Prize in economics, so he's the nudge guy. So I was just taking all these things and trying to do
Nobel Prize, solve suicide. Yeah. Sure, makes sense.
And trying to put those 2 together. So those are the main ones. I use some like psychophysiological research too, things like EEG.
So you're really looking at a lot of these things that are digital signals and digital interventions that are not about like that traditional one-on-one sort of 2 people in a chair with a checklist. You're not necessarily researching that as much.
No, definitely not as much. Although I think that there's a lot. I mean, that's still going to be around, and so that's where I think things like item count technique can really come in handy. So, I mean, do you guys care if I talk about that?
So first of all, if you guys are looking at the SPSMchat.com link, we link the ResearchGate that really talks about free studies. And so do really quick, I'm going to go get your zucchini bread and cookies really quickly, and I'm going to get you another water.
Okay.
But just really quickly tell people what those 3 basic studies are so they have an idea of I mean, we know how you got there, and you study these. Ray Tucker becomes so impressed that he takes you out to a night of slumming it at the Bell. Don't do this, people. And then suddenly you end up hungover in my dining room. Like okay. Probably.
Well, I'm a little better now.
You were probably slipped at Mickey.
Yeah.
So now that you're here, now that we gotcha, explain your research area from that ResearchGate article.
Okay. So yeah, there's 3 studies in it that I did. One was on nudges. So a nudge is just something that tries to cut off these cognitive biases that we have and tries to like influence people to do a socially desirable behavior without restricting any choice, without restricting freedoms. So that was the first one that I did. And I just asked people. So one of my big things is, with these prediction models and everything that's coming out, even if we have 100%, we know who's going to die by suicide, how are we going to get people into treatment? How are we going to get them help? And
we have an engineering problem.
Yeah, and so that was kind of like where I started from, and I was like, well, maybe I can kind of nudge people into seeking treatment a little bit more. And so I posted this online intervention just saying like we can reduce some anxiety, which is a risk factor for suicide, and I gave people this nudge, split them up into 2 groups, and the people with the nudge clicked on the intervention a lot more. So that was the first one.
Like how much is a lot?
It was like an undergraduate sample, and it was just in a big campus-wide email.
Don't tell me like all the limitations. Do that. He'll tell you at the session.
I think it was 164% more likely. Is what we
what?
So, and it was just like 1 word, or it was like 2 words, like 2 sentences.
So you can up it by like 2/3.
Yeah.
If you do
put in,
a
like,
couple words, right? So if we are needing people to seek care, seek resources, like we can do something different with our delivery.
Well, that's the really cool thing is because it's free, and it's like very scalable, and also like there's additive effects too. So you can put like one nudge and it'll stack on another nudge, and so you can research all this kind of stuff.
Is this like behavioral contingency Legos?
Maybe.
I feel like that's a thing, and someone should make that a meme. But that is. But what you're doing is you're doing things that sort of reduce resistance and increase like likelihood that people will do this sort of desirable thing that they want to do, and you can stack them up until you have something like that's fairly, like strong directedness.
Yeah. So exactly. So with this one, what I did was there's this researcher named Cialdini, and he does like a lot of social norms and stuff like that research. And so that's what I was leveraging. It's just people want to feel cared about. They want to care about other people. They care about what other people think. And so if you put a social norm up, so I put a descriptive and an adjunctive. So a descriptive is just like what people do, what happens. And then an adjunctive is what people think ought to happen, or like what people should be doing. And people care a lot about both of those. So what I did is I went to MTurk and I was just like, do you believe that people who are having thoughts of suicide?
What's MTurk for the clinicians? Yeah,
so it's like it's Amazon. So you just put your study up and people come and click it. It's just like an easier way to get your study out.
Okay, cool.
You pay them teeny tiny bits of money, 5 cents.
Yeah, it's like 25 cents basically.
Mechanical Turk.
Yeah, quarter.
Yeah. You can look that up in Wikipedia too. Keep going.
Okay, so we did this injunctive norm. So I just like, do you believe that people who are having thoughts of suicide should or deserve to get help? And 96% or 97 or 98% said that. So that's what I put in this email. It's like, if you're having thoughts of suicide, 98% of people believe that like you deserve or should get help. And so that was like the big nudge. And we also put in, most people who seek help for anxiety, they do get better. So that's like the descriptive.
So not if you're feeling suicidal, get help. If you're feeling suicidal, 98% of people believe you deserve help.
Yeah.
And if you get it, you're very likely to get better.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is data about our messaging. Like a lot of times messaging, like where we're doing some sort of thing to compel people to use crisis resources and things like that, is a bunch of clinicians sitting in a room at a committee meeting talking about alliterative sort of slogans that sound like a good idea, as if we're all madmen, but minus, the sexism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you're saying that probably there is some science around which ways we do the messaging that might actually get us the results we want.
Exactly. Like, what kind of words, as well as like where you, like how you phrase it, where you're phrasing it, like the layout of what you're doing.
So give it a couple more for instances.
So one of my favorites. So another thing that nudges are is they make things easier for you. They take off like a lot of cognitive load. So one of my favorites is people started to wanted kids to eat healthier in school, and so they were bringing in a lot of fruit.
And by people you mean Michelle Obama.
And so they were pushing all this fruit onto kids. They're like, eat your apples. And that was the big one. They're like, we're giving these kids apples and no one's eating apples. And someone was like, you should cut up the apples. And then kids started eating apples.
Because by the way, like especially like younger kids, like they're losing teeth and stuff, like, or they have braces, like that's why you do that. But like that was one of those things, right? And it's also really messy and sticky, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So Chris, you had some responses to this. This person who does suicide messaging, tell us a little more.
When you were talking, Brian, just now, I was thinking about some of the messaging that was around LGBTQ support over the last 10, 15 years. And like the recent research that came out, I think last year, about how the It Gets Better campaign wasn't really showing the level of effectiveness that people had initially thought that it would. And unfortunately, with a lot of this kind of messaging, we're stuck in this position where we really don't know if it'll work the way that we anticipate it to until it's out in the real world. We can do as many tests initially or field studies or whatever the case is before we put it out there, but we just don't know until it's out in the wild. And so I think it's really cool that if we pair things like not just go get help or it gets better, even if we're just talking about mental health in general, But if you pair it with specific examples of positive outcomes, for some reason that does something. Do we know why? Do you have a sense of why that affects people in a different way than just saying, like, go get help?
Well, I think, I mean, what we weren't able to do with this study, and what I think is going to be the next step, one is population specific. So things like the military, like if you have someone in the military and you get, 98% of your military members believe that you deserve to go and get help, I think that that's more powerful than just like the general population. So that's one thing. I think the other bit is we weren't able to tease apart, just because of methodological limitations, we weren't able to see the additive effect. So we sent out one email and then with the nudge, and then we sent out one email without the nudge. What I would have liked to have done is split, like do the injunctive, do the descriptive norm, do a combined one, and then do a control with nothing to see like what the effects are with those. We just weren't able to do it. My guess is that the injunctive norm in this case, the one that said like, this is what people believe that you should do or deserve to do, is the thing that's kind of driving it. Because it decreases a little bit of, I think, the stigma that people have just around like seeking help and in general, like feeling weak and all that kind of stuff.
I know there's been I've had several conversations, especially with the lived experience community in terms of that specific word, deserve. And it's like a lot of the terminology that we deal with, deserve is sort of contentious, because if you tell someone that they deserve to feel better, if you're in a moment of crisis, or if you're in a long-standing moment of suicidal ideation, it certainly does not feel like you deserve to feel any better. So having this research behind it, I think, is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's also, playing around just with little words like that. I mean, they seem little, but if you change out one word, it can probably have a big impact. So maybe in the next one we do like a should and then a deserve. That was something that we were going back and forth about when we were creating the measure for the initial MTurk. It's just like, which one do we do?
And so, I'm often interested in implementation. Like I'm just from practical people. But what you're telling me is, maybe we've spent time like David Jobs doing clinical trials about CAMs and things like that. But there are all these steps from having pain and being at risk to actually getting better. And there's this big, huge barrier about getting in the door. And we could be doing what's really sort of a version of clinical trials, but it's comms research about how somebody gets in the door. And you can do this word by word until you've got a fairly strong cocktail of something that's really compelling.
Exactly. Yeah, it can build up. And then the other thing is like not only getting people into treatment, but keeping people in treatment as well. Like those nudges can kind of like help you along the way.
And those are things that could be done at scale. They can be done automatically. You could be getting a follow-up from your provider that is not like my dentist. Like, my dentist sends me a text message. It's been 5 months. It's about time to schedule. We miss you. I know that that's just in the scheduling program. I know, but it's like, oh, better call the dentist, right? And it could be, in fact, that there are ways that you could be getting nudges to schedule with your therapist or things like that. And we've had people like LifeWire, and we've done this with, just Mood 247, where they even know that they're automated, but those messages prompt feelings of connectedness to their caring therapist. And you could be this, and how much, can I ask, this is a crass question.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other things I've said tonight, right? He got the pregame. He got the pregame, Doc Foreman. But how much does it cost, like, to do when you're MTurking things? Because we're so fun. Like, how much does that cost?
So MTurk, I think the one that I did, I mean, I got 800 participants for this once, and I think I paid them like 15, 20 cents because it was 5 minutes. So I can't remember off the top of my head, $200, $300.
So that's a very tiny research and development cost to figure out a few things that are a little bit more effective than what we're doing before, and that increase rates for people engaging in help seeking. Yeah,
and it's I mean, $200 and $300 to see like you said, like 164% like increase. I think it's worth it in a lot of arenas,
Right. So from a research point of view, from a public health policy point of view, from a messaging comms point of view, from an implementation point of view, this is a fairly effective use of research of resources. Bart, you had a Bart face.
Well, the work that Brian is doing is so powerful and important. Folks, if folks don't know this, you need to know this. Psychology research and social science research right now is in a state of serious trouble. We have a replication crisis going on. Do people not know about this? If this is news, I've got news for everybody out here. The state of social science research is really bad. The research and meta-analysis on the ability to replicate social science results is horrible, absolutely atrocious. Criticism that social science research and psychology is really the survey research of undergraduate students is very much a true thing. It's why we have all these correlational studies that don't tell us shit. The idea of Homo economicus has been dispelled. Human beings are not rational creatures. This is why you're not going to focus group your way to the suicide prevention problem, because what people think is going to make a difference in suicide prevention often turns out to be nothing of the kind. The sort of research that Brian is getting at really taps into the fact that human beings, and if you listen to Jonathan Haidt or any of the folks that have done a lot of the analysis of the cognitive research, most of our decisions are not conscious choices, not in the sense that you and I would think of being a conscious choice. The stuff that Brian is talking about is how do we learn about the things that actually influence behavior? And this is what's really key about what Brian is talking about. He's looking at what are the things that we can do that change people's behavior, not what they think about this or what they think about that, but if I present different things in different ways, can I alter people's behavior? And this is the best part about it. These folks, if you ask them why they did or didn't do this, would not be able to tell you why they did or didn't do this in a way. They don't understand their own behavior. This is really important.
Let me how I get you to do most things, Bart.
That and torture, and there is research on the impact of torture and negative consequences. This is what's really important. One of the things that research like Brian does, and people who are knowledgeable about the literature based on human behavior and cognition, we are not conscious actors in the way that we think of being conscious actors. It's a bunch of crap. The research does not support that. The sorts of behavioral economic research that's out there is showing that human beings are anything but rational in their choices. And we need to actually learn how the brain and the body and behavior connect, and what are the stimulus that we can use? What are things that we can use that actually create pro-social behavior or minimize harmful behavior without engaging in trying to get people to make the right choice, right? Appealing to their rationality. And these are the things that Brian is getting at. These are really powerful elements. And I think the future of suicide prevention and the future of behavioral management to a large extent is going to be around finding the things that people respond to that they're not even aware they're responding to.
So, like, exactly. And that's just the nudge stuff. I don't think he's even explained the other two things yet.
No.
So there's one that I'm a little excited about, and then we're going to discuss my Animal Crossing problem related to that. Tell us a little bit more about some of these other studies you're working on.
Yeah. So the other one, it was looking at marketing strategies. So a lot of times when we're trying to get people into treatment or learn skills or anything like that, and people are going through this really emotional time, a lot of times they don't feel like they like they said, or like what we said, they don't deserve it. Like at that time, they feel like they don't deserve it. But there's, even if they're going through that really emotional time and really like distress, they're still very willing to help other people. And so I kind of went off of that and was like, okay, well, what if I market it towards, so basically what I did is I set it up. It's the same. Everything was the same for the link, and it was just skills-based training that you can do by yourself. And I asked people, would you want to learn about skills to help yourself during an emotional crisis? And then I asked the other people, would you mind learning about skills to help others that you know and love, or something like that, going through a difficult time in the future? And those people were the ones that clicked, like 164% more of the time. And so what this does is a couple things. One, we know that one of the best ways to learn things for ourselves is to be able to teach it to other people. And so that's something that I think if you are learning it in order to teach it to someone else, you're going to learn it better yourself, and you're probably going to be able to better employ it when you need it, because it's going to be more automatic.
It's how I learned spelling in 4th grade. I was terrible at it. The teacher had me teach Leslie, or was it Mary, one of the two, and I could spell everything.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's true. Like, then suddenly I became very focused on it. And
what happened to Mary?
I don't want to tell that story because Bart's not gonna like it.
Early patients didn't have the same
the-
outcomes as the later patients. Is what I'm getting at. Training counts.
So one of the things that's really interesting, we have another SPSM regular, Glenn Moriarty from 7 Cups of Tea, and this is a peer support network, right? So it's a social media platform. People listen to each other and provide support. It's great. I've road tested this several times. I get a wonderful user experience. But one of the ways that he's able to do millions of chats a month is that he's leveled up volunteers now. How many hundreds of thousands of volunteers every month? And
it's 250,000 conversations a week, so that means that there's at least that many every week.
That's incredible.
And the way that they've gotten that many people all over the world keeping the platform going is that he said he started leveling up volunteers because he ran a banner, and the banner said, "Thank you so much. I hope you really like that. Would you like to learn how to help others?" Yeah. And people clicked, so that the people who received help then got the training to help others, and that leveled up peer support, which is a nice real life case of exactly what you're saying. You should totally hang out with Glenn Moriarty. He would get along, I think. Yeah. Look at Bart. This is like the best party ever, all these people. So study 2, you did this, and what was the percentage of people?
I think that one was almost the same. I think it was 167% clicked on that one, and they stayed on the page much longer, so we saw like the range was much wider than the other one. So just kind of clicking. And then
2/3 increase of clicking, and then longer time spent on the page.
Yep.
And once again, like Bart says, these people aren't necessarily conscious that they're spending. This not like, and now I will choose to spend longer on the page because of my altruism, right? No. Like I don't think people notice that they're doing that.
No, and it's that's what it is. That's what like doing good nudge work I think is kind of like anticipating what you know is probably going to go on in that person's mind and cutting it off so to like kind of reroute it to a more like desirable outcome.
And if you can do this for just a few $100s, you can A/B test or you can ABC test. You can test a few different things and pick your stronger nudges.
Yep, exactly.
Whereas when we're doing these campaigns for messaging, where we're like a group of us clinicians or bureaucrats, whatever, in a room trying to hope that we come up with a good idea, may spend months, thousands of dollars, a lot of approval, and we don't have anything to compare it to, so we don't know if it was the most effective message or not. What you're saying is I can give 2 messages and a couple $100. I can tell you which one's better and why.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome. Okay, Bart, you're doing Bart nod.
Yeah, well, because I mean, the research on this is really compelling and often doesn't make a lot of sense. When they looked at trying to get people to reduce picking up rocks from a trail that was a protected trail, he knows the study I'm talking about. When you actually tell people, please don't pick up these rocks, these are historic rocks and too many people are taking the rocks. And if you keep taking these rocks, none of the rocks will be left. That message increased the number of people taking rocks, right? So this thing that should trigger the rational part of the human brain didn't work at all, right? And what's really comforting to me is that one of the techniques that we've used at BHR over the years in St. Louis is when promoting suicide prevention messaging and resources to youth. I learned really quickly, don't tell youth this is for you if you're in crisis. We learned they wouldn't even take the card. They wouldn't even look at us. But if we say, hey, if you run into somebody and you're worried about them, here's resources that you can use to help them. They always take the card, always. And they're more likely to call for themselves. That's the thing that's so intriguing about it, right? So these little nudges, these little things that we do that circumvent this rational, what we think is rational anyway, which isn't rational at all, and connect to these deeper implicit cognitive processes are really what we should be connecting to, right? It goes along the lines with some of the research that David Jobs has done, where people in a suicide crisis are actually more comfortable talking to a computer than they are to a human being, right? This does not make sense. And I guarantee you there's people from certain groups that I'm connected with that would be outraged at suggesting that a person at risk of suicide would rather talk to a computer than a human being. But it turns out, in fact, they would, and there's lots of reasons to explain why that is, right? And so we've really got to explore all of these things, and the nudge pieces that Brian's working on is absolutely incredible. Brian, did you get anything that surprised you? Any results that surprised you? The effect size surprised you? Anything that you were like, holy cow?
I'm at your effect size.
So we had because this was a very primitive kind of pilot study that we did, we didn't really do too many powerful analyses. So it was very much almost like descriptive and z-test proportions and things like that. So
for the non-researchers,
Yes.
what does that mean?
It means that we didn't do, so it was just very elementary like testing is what we did. We just wanted to know kind of how many people clicked, how long did they stay? Like that was kind of what we wanted to see, just to see if there was anything at all. So like the percentages is kind of like the biggest thing that we have right now.
So in research statistic land, just knowing that 167% more clicked on it is considered really, really basic statistics. There are really, really sophisticated tests that can be run, but you have to have usually a higher N, or you have to test higher numbers of people because there's so much noise or error in your data that in order for you to see a result, unless the result is extremely strong, you just have to have so much of it, right? And so that's, I think, great what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and the other thing is, so we on Qualtrics, or on the program that we use to like disperse this link to click on the study, we were actually doing something. We put it in the consent, but like when you click on the link, like we're actually monitoring how long you're staying and all that kind of stuff. And people probably didn't like read that too carefully, and so we didn't get too much data on every single person with that. It was just kind of like broader. It was almost like we gathered almost like anonymous data kind of.
Okay.
So it wasn't like linking to a certain data.
So like we'll talk about like what you need to sort of, level up what you're doing so that you could do it on a bigger scale. Tony, what are your thoughts about this?
Why did it take this long? Does anybody have an opinion? Like William James invented dual process theory in like 1870. Like, why did it take us this long to consider these things? Like, I love your work. I think it's brilliant. I think, and I want you to keep doing it because all these other jerks didn't do it. Like, why did they wait for you to show up? You seem charming, but like, why now? Does anybody know?
Do you really?
Maybe you know.
Here's the answer, Tony. If you're interested, you really want an answer.
I am. Yeah.
It was
you guys,
a reaction
he still
against.
has to get back. Like he still has to graduate. You guys.
He'll be fine.
He should hear this. So it was a reaction against psychoanalytic theory, right? So psychoanalytic theory, which dominated therapy and treatment for a really long time, with the idea that these unconscious impulses needed to be addressed in a therapeutic approach that made the behaviorist really, really squidgy. The behaviorism didn't answer the question, so we came up with this like middle ground cognitive behavioral, which is still heavily based in the idea that people are making conscious choices, that they can consciously make a decision to use different words and different framing to change the way that they feel. And cognitive behavioral approaches had some success, right? And they were research based. They were randomly controlled trials. But then all of this, and there's been this huge debate around the role of emotion, the idea that thinking controls emotion. The science is pretty clear now that emotion is cognition, right? That this dichotomy we made between thoughts and feelings, that these are separate things. It's pretty clear now that affect is in fact part of the cognitive system in and of itself. And it is the driving factor in the cognitive system. Human beings are primarily emotional creatures who then use thoughts to then explain away behavior that's being driven at a much deeper level, right? So that's how
there are like three competing theories on that.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that
I don't know.
There are.
I don't know that that's true.
It's strong stuff.
Taught it a lot. So I will tell you that another problem, quite honestly, is that, and I was one of the few people from the clinical counseling. We had clinical counseling and experimental programs all in our department. And I was one of the only clinical counseling people. I was in counseling. That got to teach social psych. Social psych was the domain of the experimental psych program. So the people who were doing clinical things and treatment related things were not looking at ways that you could manipulate large groups of people. And what I loved about teaching social psych was that I could do an intervention on my students' behavior. It worked every single week. I told them what I was going to do the week before I did it to them. I did it to them, and then we talked about it, and it got them every time. And so I could do something that would impact and control people's behavior, which you know how I feel about that part. And I love teaching it. And those social psych interventions we've known about in experimental psychology a really long time. got to hang out at a bar with Zimbardo once. He's an interesting dude, right? Like, we were absolutely aware that we could do things in people's environment or nudge behavior, but it was happening in a different part of the psych department overall. Strong theory? Wait, that's my working model on that one.
Yeah, I have a lot of like different kind of thoughts that kind of like spin off on that. And
Go for it.
Well, one thing that I'm really interested in is kind of like how nudges and a lot of the social psychological literature, they're almost like illusions in a sense. So like cognitive illusions where you can tell people and it really doesn't make a difference, they'll still do it. Mm-hmm. Which is really, I mean, that's awesome. It's really awesome and it's really powerful. And so there's a couple things that come with it, you know. One thing that I'm starting to look more and more at is something called effective forecasting. And basically that's saying that, you know, we kind of, when we think about the future, if something's bad is going to happen, we really overestimate it. And when we think something is good that's going to happen, we tend to really overestimate it. And we think that these big things like getting these big careers and these big jobs or whatever is going to make us like really happy. If we just get them and we kind of go down to that hedonic treadmill. We just kind of go back to baseline.
Hedonic treadmill is?
Hedonic treadmill is like you get happy off of that thing, but it doesn't last very long. So you get the job and you go up and then you just kind of
everybody kind of has a baseline.
Everybody kind of has a baseline. And
you're as happy as you're going to be. Once you make about $70,000 a year, that's about as happy as you get.
Yeah. And so, you know, when it comes to decision making, I think that's kind of a larger thing that I'm looking at here with nudges and everything. Is just decision making theory, like as kind of a you know, at the very top. And how people are making these cognitive errors during emotional times, especially in regards to effective forecasting. And I think that says a lot about possibly different things within like a suicidal state and how fast that can happen, especially like the Milner came out with a paper that said like within 5 minutes, certain things can happen really fast. And I'm just wondering where like some of the cognitive errors come from within that like effective forecasting model.
Like there's some sort of script when that suicidal thinking happens where you really are irrational in a really specific way that's really similar to how other people are like, which is really interesting. And you're cognitive forecasting about how inescapable your problems are.
That's what it is, yeah.
Right. So my patients at high risk of suicide, like 6 months after a crisis where we've done a lot of DBT, they'll be like, I didn't believe my entire life could be turned around in 6 months. If I had been able to think this way, I never would have attempted suicide. But in that moment, they really believe that there is never going to get better. No. Right. And it's like they believe that. It's like things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Bart's very excited, so we gotta give him some love.
Well, I think that this is really key, isn't it? There's some growing evidence that there is a point in the suicide crisis where the person's cognition becomes so constricted, right? That the ability to cognitively mediate the crisis is almost non-existent, right? So there's this point, and Kevin Briggs talks about this, where there's this point when people are standing on the side of the bridge, you've got to do something drastic to draw their attention to break them out of that place that they're in, that they're just so locked in. Right. The other thing, and I think this is why the approach that we take when we're working with people at risk of suicide is so incredibly powerful, is that a lot of these nonverbal things that we do, our behavior, our tone, not being judgmental, these are things that help create space for the person at a very implicit level, soothing things that help bring some immediate relief. Right. And then this is why, you know, kind of challenging them cognitively on things or getting them to work through in a rational way about why suicide's a bad idea often are not effective in any way, shape, or form, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work that has to go around that based on where the person is cognitively, right? So I think these are key. Just like I think that the nudge, for whatever reason, blue lights, and I talked about this in the last show. We know for whatever reason, blue lights are this thing that people are less likely to kill themselves when there's blue lights present in a setting. Why the hell is that? I don't have a clue, but it's kind of a nudge effect, right? A nudge, really, this is really true. A nudge is barriers on bridges, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't make it impossible for people to jump, right? It just puts another barrier that makes it that much harder for people to jump. It doesn't make it completely impossible, but when they put barriers up, the rate of people using that method drop dramatically, sometimes to zero, even though it is something that they could work around, right? But when you put enough of a barrier in, right, you're nudging them in a different direction. So these are things that are really important. That's why means restriction is so important. We're adding this barrier, which again is a nudge. Right? Anything that you can do to make it more difficult is a really good thing. A good example of a nudge I shared with the group earlier, when you Google easiest way to kill yourself using Google, the first thing that flashes up on your Google search is the National Lifeline phone number and chat link, right? There are other, as we learned, there are other search engines that when you Google easiest way to kill yourself, it doesn't nudge you in a different direction. It pretty much
Bing!
shoots you right.
Shame on you, Bing! Shame on you, Bing. 97% of search engines help people get to the crisis line, but not you, Bing, you asshole.
I mean, I think Bing has a lot of issues outside of just this one.
Now, I want to point out that in a lot of narratives about suicide, including media narratives or in literature, movies, people treat being suicidal as if it is a decision made by someone in a rational state who has thought through everything. And we were even reading a news article about someone who's created sort of a 3D print model of a coffin that you build, and you can poison yourself, and you sort of press a button and it's like a suicide box that you can use yourself, and you can now download the printout and make it yourself. And everyone's horrified, and he's like, well, I believe people should be able to choose their death. And I think there is this myth where we think maybe the science may be different, that suicide, when in fact it very rarely is a thought out thing. It is very often, we think, the result of a great deal of distortion. And people don't seem to understand that. They really believe someone's thought this out, and we've done a very poor job of explaining the science of that. Brian?
I think that's very true. Well, no, I think that's very true. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, and particularly in this culture, it's different in other cultures, but in this culture, our idea of what choice is and free will is a very different thing than what the research tells us what choice and free will are, right? And so we really have this sense, for instance, our approach to substance use is very much that people are choosing to use drugs and be substance dependent. That's not how any of this stuff works. It's absolutely not how any of it works. We know the research on this is really, really solid, but we are really focused on this idea that people are conscious actors. They're making choices and weighing all the evidence. To the extent that suicide is rational, is that in the sense of the intense emotional pain the person is experiencing with a perception of zero chance of this ever getting any better, that's not irrational. But that decision is being driven at a very deep level by intense pain and cognitive constriction. So what seems quite rational for that person in the moment, for the rest of us, we're like, what are you talking about? That doesn't seem rational at all. So it's also about perspective taking, right? And understanding the space that people are occupying in that moment.
So we're at 45 minutes, and I have to apologize. My dog outside, we have guests and we have food out. And if we let her in, she'll break the dishes and go all, and she's been in for days and been getting so much love. So she believes she's been exiled. She's losing her mind. She's learned how to pick up her dish and throw it against the side of the house. She's going nuts. If we put her in the crate, it's louder. I'm so sorry for those who've sent in comments. Brian, have we got to all three?
One left.
One left, and we've only got 10 minutes before final thoughts.
Okay.
Do it.
Go for it.
Okay. So the last one that I did, there's something called item count technique or list randomization. This is
the thing that gets you.
Can you let Brian tell the friggin' story? Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. I'm just kidding. So what we did, it was the same study. So we had like 800 people and we split them up into two groups. And so what item count technique is you ask people 4 questions that you're pretty sure you know the answer to. So like I Googled one of like the most rare diseases in the world, and I was like, it's just true, false. That's all you're doing for these questions. You're asking the person, how many of these are true for you, not which. So how many are true, not which. So they read these 4 statements and, do you have this rare disease? Like false, obviously, is going to be one. Do you have access to the internet? You're obviously like on MTurk, you have access to the internet. So I go through so that the variance between these is the differences between the questions or the answers are going to be very similar. So I do that for one. And then later on, I ask them, have you had thoughts of suicide in the last year? So just a very direct question.
And they've been answering direct questions that are very binary without a lot of ambiguity.
Yes. And so the other one, remember, is just how many, not which. And so on the other one, what you do is you add a fifth item. And that item is the exact same question. It's just like, I've had thoughts of suicide in the past year. And so you just ask true or false for all of these, right? And then I don't ask them directly later on. And so what it does, if you subtract the means between those two, which is really cool to me, you get a proportion of the estimate who actually endorsed that fifth item. You have no idea who did it, but it gives you this very accurate epidemiological data. So this is important because prevalence rates, you know, how many people are actually endorsing this.
Because, by the way, we don't know. We've been guessing a lot. If you're Norway, and I learned this in China a couple weeks ago, the Norwegians have all the data on everybody, but in a lot of places, like in the United States, we don't. So we've been estimating. And so this is important because we could figure it out.
Well, I think one of the most important things is we often cite it as a limitation. We say people don't want to disclose, you know, on self-report forms, like people aren't giving us accurate data. We actually don't know. And because this has worked so well in other socially unacceptable behaviors, things like, you know, just stigmatized behaviors like gambling.
Well, like all the stuff we discussed before the show.
So we know that this technique works. And so what I thought was like, okay, the people who I asked directly, that's going to be much lower. That percentage is going to be far lower because I asked them directly. They're going to be kind of like identified. The other people, like they could have chosen true for any of those. Like, I don't know which one. And what we found is that they are the exact same. So what this is telling us is that online data is probably pretty accurate when it comes to gathering suicide-related information. And that's really important because, again, we're citing that as a limitation consistently on all of our... So
you can tell all these people, never mind, you're good.
Yeah, what it just tells us, like when we actually are doing that stuff directly... It's
so when that asshole in the back goes, how do you know everyone on the internet doesn't lie because I lie on the internet? You can be like, well, according to Bauer et al.
Yeah, most people don't.
Most people tell the truth.
But the thing that's going to be really interesting, the thing that... So I'm hopefully going to be presenting this to like at a DoD conference later on, is...
DoD is?
Department of Defense. For the military, this is where I think it could be really, really impactful, is in populations where there is a very salient reason to disclose because you can get in trouble, you can get privileges taken away, that sort of stuff at certain points during like military service.
Hi, Tom Cruise in Belgium, who's serving in the military and watching us right now.
And so what we can do is if we implement that to the military, like, yeah, we might not be able to identify risk, but we can tell how many people there actually are at risk more accurately.
That is pretty good. Okay, look, Tony got flushed at one point because he likes this item count stuff.
Love it.
Freaky cool.
Okay, look.
Freaky cool.
Chris, we haven't heard from you, and just want to give you a chance to talk about that just really quickly.
Twitter's telling me I'm a robot.
Damn it! I've had my tweeting back. This is why we're switching Twitter. You have just become a big pain in the ass.
Well, listen, we did ask them to become a pain in the ass about the bots, and then they became a pain in the ass about the bots, and now we're complaining about it.
Yeah, we're just so close, Tony. The algorithms are so close to achieving perfection. We're just one more tweak, and the algorithms will be just as good as a human being. It's just
your false positives. You just want your false positives to be 99.9999999999999.
Yeah, we all saw Zuckerberg testify for conference this week, explaining social media to old people.
This is, don't face slime book. Okay, so so one of the things that's really key about what Brian's talking about, one of my favorite studies looked at youth universal screening of suicide in pediatricians' offices, and what they found is that when you give youth a survey pre-appointment, that is then, and they're told after you fill this out, your physician will talk to you about your results. The results that they got matched the youth risk behavior survey analysis about the percentage of youth that are having suicide thoughts. And so we found that youth were just as willing to disclose thoughts of suicide to their primary care physician as they were to an anonymous survey, right? which is incredibly compelling. People trust their doctors. They really, really do. We've put a lot of faith in, and they're more willing to tell their doctor than a mental health professional for a lot of different reasons, right? And so this idea of finding these sources and places where people are willing to disclose freely is really important. It's why I think we should have universal screening in primary care practices, because youth will tell their doctors what the hell's going on with them.
Why is Brian so excited about this? I mean, I know why you're excited about it, Foreman.
No, this is also, by the way, every time someone says that stigma is the reason we don't have data, then I'm like, fuck you. Your bad research is the reason you don't have data. You didn't talk to Brian.
Oh, that's fighting words. So, Brian, why do you care about this?
You know, I just think that, again, this is completely stolen from Freakonomics podcast.
We approve.
Yeah, I think that, one, it's just, we know that it works because it's worked with a bunch of other stuff. So now we know it works with suicide-related thoughts and behaviors. So that's
solid methodology.
And then the other one is that, you know, it lends support that what we're gathering online is accurate and we can use that, right? We don't have to
confirms what our assumptions. Confirms our assumptions.
Yeah,
supports evidence.
Confirmation bias.
And then the last one is, it's just that now I kind of want to see where it maybe falls off a little bit. So what about telephones? Is that like too personal? What about in-person and filling out a report? What about in-person and talking to someone? So where do we kind of like start to shift where we start to maybe conceal or deny a little bit more?
So
could different, just a minute, April, have you not said enough? Could there be different, could different populations have different levels of resistance to different methods of communication?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They could.
Yeah.
They could.
I rest my case. He's like my cousin Vinny. I've never seen Bart have to like hold it in before.
5 long minutes, April. You got 5 minutes. Tell us everything you want to.
This is like final thoughts. So so here's the deal. Ian, Sarah, and Brian Bauer, we will be presenting. Where are y'all presenting?
We are presenting Thursday, 4:45, I think. Hold on.
Get your apps out. So if you want to come fangirl, Ian and Brian, or fanboy, we don't, or fan intersex, we don't judge.
Oh man.
What? Did you have it?
Did you put the put the screen on Chris?
Is it backward?
Oh my god. No, it's
Thursday,
perfect.
4:45.
If you want to come fangirl them, come to see them and come talk with them. Also, we're going to convince them to go out to drinks. We're going to convince them to come to the SPSM party. I've got a fog machine. There are LED lights. We're going to convince them so that you can talk about how these folks are using Freakonomics podcast, Nobel Prize winning interventions at this intersection of intervention, like doing these applications at scale in new ways. This is a wonderful time to be in suicide prevention. It's a wonderful time to be a student or an early career researcher because things are developing rapidly and there's a lot of options and possibility for innovation, right? Mm-hmm. And so what are your plans
for
your life?
Man, I just want to keep doing this kind of stuff. That's all I'm trying to do.
We'll have you back anytime, but we'll be on Twitch because this is, this is like YouTube, only old people, right? And Logan Paul. So final thoughts for the evening. I know that was good, wasn't it? Logan Paul. Final thoughts when you're thinking about your research. If you were wanting to sort of, give the take-home message, what do you think, Brian? Is final thought?
I just think that there's so many different ways to implement nudges. And I think that it can be useful in like every single area too. I mean, Ray and I last night were talking about like even just setting it up so that you can have
drunk at the bell.
That, even if we have little nudges during like a really long questionnaire, will that keep people more engaged and things like that? Like there's so many different areas from treatment for like in treatment, getting people at all stages. I think that it's just, nudges can be implemented everywhere and they cost like nothing and they're very scalable. I just think that it's
and we could say, instead of saying maybe it was stigma or maybe they were bored or maybe the data's bad, we'd know which methods have the better reliable rates and we would have we could say this
cheap,
is the better
scalable interventions that we could use for public health.
Final thoughts, Tony.
Cheap, scalable interventions that we could use for public health. Finally! Instead of all this slow, expensive crap that everybody's throwing at us all the time.
Send everybody to committee meeting for a
week. Let's have 2-day trainings for everybody in the world. Good luck. I'd like to buy the world a Coke.
Final thoughts, Bart.
Final thoughts, Brian. What a treat getting to meet you. I cannot wait to see
Wonderful.
you at AAAS and learn more about the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I'm one of the folks that really thinks that behavioral economics is the future of behavioral health and public health, that these things that we're learning about how you
read the research gate.
It's I read it. I read through. I did. Just don't even.
I didn't.
Final thoughts.
Tony
Final
didn't.
thoughts.
I did. But that my final thought is that you're a mean person, but you're doing the best you can, April, and we support you anyway.
I feel validated. Ray Tucker, he came back. Final thoughts.
I read an interesting stat here. So about 99% of conference attendees actually believe program chairs should have drinks bought for them. And 100% grateful for that. So just a quick stat for you. Another question for you about nudges. So if we know that suicide risk assessments by clinicians are influenced by things like our own religious background, our own past experiences of suicidal behavior, how can nudges be used to improve clinician suicide risk assessment? Just a thought.
Robots. Chris Maxwell, final thoughts.
I'm not a robot. So and Twitter finally let me back in. Final thoughts. I think this is, Brian, this is some amazing research. The just expansive amount of applications that can be done with this is fascinating. I think earlier, why haven't we been doing this for 50 years? What are we doing? So it's awesome to have you doing this stuff now. John Ackerman, and can we all agree that John Ackerman is amazing? We all love John Ackerman.
We can all agree
that's why
John
he's printed
Ackerman,
on my pillow. I put his tweets on my pillow at night. But anyway, go ahead.
So he had a great tweet that I thought was really interesting. He talked about how nudges currently are really used by an outside entity. I'll just read it. Using strategies to shape an individual's behavior deemed unhealthy, but nudges are most powerful when self-directed and employed in the aim of self-care. So there's, even when we do have these effective tools, how do we get people to kind of internalize them and make it a habitual change rather than something that we manipulate on them? So I think this is all fascinating stuff, and there's a lot of room to grow here.
So my final thought is suicidologists really are passionate about this. They really do go out and party late and still talk about their research. We really do go hang out at the Dubliner and like visit together after a day of conferencing and creating content about it. And we still keep talking about great ideas about research. If you are in DC this week, please do come hang with us. Come hang with Brian Ian-Sero. Come hang with Ray Tucker. Come hang with Bart, Chris, Tony, all of these SPSM alum. Come hang with your favorite researchers. These ideas are compelling. They're interesting. It's fun to play with them, and you can do great good with them. Also, Fog Machine.
One final comment. Wait, one final comment.
Wait. Yes.
When you get to the conference, see Chris Maxwell. He's got glow rings for the appendage of your choice for the conference. Make sure you hit him up.
There, I have to tell you. So I sent this, but those. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's the secret word. So there are some emojis. There are only a couple poop Illuminati. And if you were on SPSM last year, you know the poop Illuminati is like the secret sign of SPSM. So only a few. So if you didn't get one, you have to come up to like Chris Maxwell, head of the social media crew, and let him know that you're in the poop Illuminati. Otherwise, you may get the ring that says that you're not in, and we will all know the difference. It really is like the monkey hand paw. That is the show. There'll be so much streaming this week. We cannot wait to get to Twitch. We are so excited to see stackup.org. So big shout out to Elvis and Stephanie and to their big crew who are gaming, helping and serving veterans, and saving lives at the same time. I can't imagine better. You guys have a great week. We'll all be together soon.